Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. I spent most of the day working on a story by Chuck Joyce, which will appear in the summer issue of Military Images Magazine. Chuck has written a really interesting story about Gettysburg. He is a collector of photographs, of portrait photographs of soldiers who served in Gettysburg during the battle. And I'm looking forward to sharing his story with all of you. Part of his story includes a reference to the book of which the title page is included here. This is the revised report to the legislature of Pennsylvania about the Soldiers' National Cemetery. It is a fascinating primary source document, and I've included the link here in the language connected to this video so that you can explore it, and I highly recommend it for a bunch of reasons. Maybe the most important reason is if you're looking for the origin story of how the Soldiers' National Cemetery at Gettysburg, students of the Civil War know, it's that semicircular cemetery, that semicircular arrangement with all the sections for soldiers from different states, the known, the unknown. It's a powerful place. It's definitely hallowed ground. And if you haven't been there, I recommend a visit. Anyway, this report goes into detail about how the project came to be. But maybe the most moving and the most powerful parts of the book, at least for me, are the lists of all the soldiers and the work that was done primarily by a retired photographer in Gettysburg named Samuel Weaver, who carefully went through the remains of the disinterred bodies as they were being moved to the cemetery. And keep in mind, these bodies had originally been buried during the days after the battle, where the corpses were lying in the heat, the sun, after the rain. The smell of the bodies intermingled with horses and all the equipment and other wreckage strewn across the battlefield was not only a disrespect to all of the dead, but it was a health hazard to all of those who were living and trying to take care of the wounded and getting the wounded removed during those very tentative days and weeks following the battle. So Weaver was going through all of these disinterred bodies very carefully, exploring them for some clues to their identity. Because they had been buried so hastily, there really wasn't time to do a proper accounting of what was on the bodies of these men. And as a result, during those hasty burials, some identities were lost. Weaver was able to find some of those, or I should say, identify some of the bodies. I want to read you a passage from the report by David Wills, who was the agent in charge of the battlefield. And then I want to read you some examples, particularly those that involve the finding of photographs, of which there's 14 bodies that were listed as having ambrotypes, one with a glass photograph, which is another word for an ambrotype, and then two that had likenesses, which I think are probably carte de visite photographs. So let me start by reading you this passage. This is a quote from Wills's report. He talks about the battlefield work and the recovery of the bodies, owing in part to the great care and attention bestowed by Samuel Weaver, whom I employed to superintend the exhuming of the bodies. Through his untiring and faithful efforts, the bodies in many unmarked graves have been identified in various ways, sometimes by letters, by papers, receipts, certificates, diaries, memorandum books, photographs, marks on the clothing, belts or cartridge boxes, and etc. have the names of the soldiers been discovered. Money and other valuables have frequently been found, which were the residence where the residence of the friends is known, have been immediately sent to them. Those not returned to the friends are carefully packed up and marked, and every effort will be made to find the friends of the deceased and place these articles in their possession. Words would fail to describe the grateful relief that this work has brought to many a sorrowing household. A father, a brother, a son has been lost on this battlefield, supposed to be killed, but no tidings whatever have the bereaved friends of him. Suddenly, in the progress of this work, his remains are rediscovered by sure marks, letters, photographs, and etc., and they are deposited in a coffin with care and buried in this very appropriate place on the battlefield where he fell, the Soldiers' National Cemetery. So there's wills talking about the recovery of the bodies, the finding of photographs and other personal items, and then the bodies that are identified, burying all those personal items with the bodies. So when you go to the Soldiers' National Cemetery and you see those bodies, those gravestones, those markers laid out in the big semicircles, realize that underneath them are not only the bodies, but they're also papers, photographs, and other documents. So in going through the report, what really touched me, what really moved me, were these very simple listings of the bodies and what they found out about them. So I want to share just a few examples with you. So here's one. It's under the list of Wisconsin soldiers, and it simply says, Philip Bennett's, Company F, 7th Regiment, glass photograph, pencil, diary, letters, and knife. That's what they found on Bennett's body. Here's another one from Pennsylvania. James Kelly, Company K, 69th Regiment, ambrotype, 60 cents, comb, metal. And here's another one, an Ohio soldier, a Daniel Palmer, Company D, 107th Regiment, ambrotype, and testament. Now, here's some of the bodies that were partly identified or unknown. And here's the first one. It's grave number 57. That's how it's identified. William Shuley, S-H-U-L-Y. William Shuley, ambrotype, New York Volunteers. I suspect that they may have found his belt buckle that might have said NYS, SNY, state of New York, or maybe buttons, I don't know, but somehow they knew he was a volunteer from New York. And then here's a couple of the unidentified soldiers, the unknown soldiers that they were not able to identify. So here's the first of three that I want to share with you. Unknown, with likeness on which is marked Charles Keller, July 4th, 1859. In this case, likeness would be a photograph, probably a carte de visite. Here's another one. Unknown, ambrotype, knife, 2 pipes, keys, inkstand. And one more. Unknown corporal, ambrotype of female. It's all that was known of these men, their bodies that had been hastily buried in the ground with whatever was on their uniforms, whatever was in their vest pockets, their coat pockets, maybe a haversack or some other bag that they were carrying. And Samuel Weaver, retired photographer, sifting through all of these grave sites with the help of others. He was not alone. There was others, men of color and white men who were doing the digging and finding these bodies. And so it's a little bit of what they found. And wow, for me, it's just sort of heart-wrenching to read those descriptions aloud. And I recommend taking a look at the book. As I mentioned, I've got the link below here. So click on it. It's a free book, and you can take a look at some of the names. Maybe you'll recognize some of them. Anyway, that's it for today. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then.